Nora did not ask Vale 9 if he wanted to come with her. She said, "I'm moving in about 10 minutes. You can come or you can stay." She looked at his secondary limb. "I'd come." He came. She moved through the ruined building the way water moves through a cracked thing, finding every gap, never forcing, never hesitating long enough for hesitation to mean anything. He followed her as best he could, with one limb dragging, and his sensory nodes at 60%, and the outside sounds getting louder, the closer they got to the door. The door wasn't a door anymore. She stepped through the gap like it was. He followed her into the Karath corridor, and felt the full weight of the word war for the first time in his life. Not as a data set, not as a report, as a smell, as a color, as the way the air pushed against him from directions that didn't make sense. He moved. The unit's position was a grain storage building that had been through something significant and survived it, partially. 3 outer walls still solid. A 4th that was more suggestion than structure. Sandbags where the 4th wall used to be. A ceiling with 3 holes in it that let in both light and rain, and occasionally, Vale 9 would learn, debris. It was, by any objective measure, a terrible place to be. The humans inside were eating. This was the first thing that stopped him in the doorway. 6 of them, arranged in various states of sitting and leaning against walls, and they were eating, and one of them was laughing at something the one next to him had just said. And the building was absorbing small impacts, distant but frequent, like someone knocking on a very large door, and none of them looked up when Nora came in. One of them looked up when Vale 9 came in. "Huh," said the one named Danny Ree. He was young, the youngest in the room by a visible margin, which Vale 9 estimated by the way he moved, which was still slightly too much, still burning energy he didn't know yet to save. Danny looked at Vale 9 the way most species look at something they have never seen before. Then he looked at Nora. "Where'd you find that?" "It crashed," Nora said, dropping her bag. "Cool," said Danny. "Is it friendly?" "Seems like," Nora said. "Cool," Danny said again, and went back to eating. The man in the center of the room, the one seated on an overturned crate with a battered piece of paper in his hands, looked up. This was Pete Garza. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at Vale 9 the way someone looks at a variable they need to account for. Not with hostility. With the specific focus of a person who has already decided to deal with whatever is in front of them, and is simply calculating the fastest route. "Can it fight?" Pete said to Nora. "I don't know," Nora said. Pete looked at Vale 9. "Can you fight?" "My species is observational," Vale 9 said. Pete nodded slowly. "Can you stay out of the way?" "Yes, good enough." He looked back at his paper. That was the entirety of Vale 9's introduction to the unit. He would describe it to the Galactic Council as the most efficient social processing he had ever witnessed. The Council would not include it in their summary. The others, Lou Briggs sat against the south wall, and had the eyes of someone who had already looked at every room they would ever walk into, and found it coming up short. He didn't speak to Vale 9 that first hour. He did move slightly to the left when Vale 9 needed to pass, which is its own kind of acknowledgement. May Solis was the one who left food near Vale 9. Not for him. She had no idea what he consumed, and didn't ask. She just put a small portion of something on the ground within his reach, like placing a book on a shelf someone might one day want. She didn't look at him when she did it. He didn't eat it. Neither of them commented. Cal Decker laughed again. The building shook slightly from something outside. Cal laughed at the shaking too. He laughed at the state of his own boots. He laughed at something Danny said. He laughed at his own response to what Danny said. Vale 9 spent considerable effort trying to understand Cal Decker, and concluded, finally, that Cal was either the least frightened person in the room, or the most. He is still not sure which. Ren Okafor was the one on watch near the gap in the fourth wall. She looked at Vale 9 once, early on. Looked at him the way you look at something you understand, without needing to name it. Then she went back to watching the corridor outside. Later, when Vale 9's secondary limb was aching from the cold, and he was failing to disguise it, she moved slightly closer without saying a word, and blocked the draft coming through the gap with her own body. He did not ask her to do this. She did not explain it. Danny came and sat next to him after a while, in the particular way young creatures insert themselves into spaces without checking whether the space has consented. "What's your planet like?" Danny said. Vale 9 looked at him. In his species, that question is asked only between family members, only in private, only when the intention is deeply formal. He processed this. He answered anyway. He talked for a while, about the triple light system his planet orbited, about the way his species lived in network colonies, all of them humming the same shared quiet, about the complete and total absence of anything that looked like what was currently happening on Karath. Danny listened. He sat perfectly still, which Vale 9 would later note was extremely unusual for him, and he listened for the full 4 minutes that Vale 9 spoke. Then Danny said, "Sounds boring. No offense." Vale 9 did not know how to respond to this. "I mean," Danny said, "sounds peaceful. That's good. Peaceful is good. I just mean it sounds very quiet." "It is very quiet," Vale 9 agreed. "Do you miss it?" A pause. The building knocked again. Cal laughed at the building. "Yes," Vale 9 said. Danny nodded. He pulled a deck of cards from somewhere and started shuffling them, and the sound they made moving through his hands was a fast, papery whisper, back and forth, constant as breathing. Vale 9 watched them move. Watched Danny's hands find the same rhythm every time, sure and practiced, like touching something familiar in the dark. A portable ritual for touching the concept of chance. That is how Vale 9 would describe the cards in his report. And this is the one line the Galactic Council did not redact, though they debated it. Nora sat down near the doorway and opened her bag and started checking her supplies. She counted them in a low voice. Going down. Vale 9 noticed, with some part of himself he didn't have a good name for, that the counting made the room feel steadier. Outside, the war continued its language. Inside, the unit ate and talked and laughed and cleaned their equipment and did all the small, ordinary things that living things do when they have decided, without announcing it, to keep going. He watched them. He had no framework for what he was seeing. His species had studied humans for decades. The files were extensive. The files had not covered this. The files had covered what humans do when they fight. Nobody had thought to document what they do between the dying. The orders came overnight. Pete read them on his battered device, face showing nothing, and then he set the device down and sat with the information for a moment, the way you sit with something hot before you decide to pick it up again. 2 kilometers. Contested ground. Link up with the larger force on the other side. How contested? Danny asked. Enough, Pete said. That was the briefing. 12 words. Vale 9 counted them. They moved before the sky got fully light, which wasn't saying much, because the sky over Karath hadn't been fully anything since the corridor fighting started. It was the color of an old bruise, low and flat and thick, and the sun was in there somewhere behind it, doing its best and failing. Smoke moved in long, slow ropes from somewhere Vale 9 couldn't see. The ground underfoot was wrong, buckled in some places, collapsed in others, like the earth had tried to respond to everything happening on top of it, and run out of ways. Vale 9 moved with them. He wasn't sure when he had decided this. He had not been ordered to. He had not been invited. But the alternative was to remain in the grain building alone. And something in him that was not courage, something more like the deep animal refusal to be the only one left in a room, would not allow it. Nora walked near him without making a production of it. He was grateful for this in a way he didn't examine. Before they left, he watched the ritual. It happened without announcement. No signal, no command. Pete gave the route one more look and then put the paper away. That was the beginning of it. Lou walked the unit, moved through them slow and deliberate, touching each person on the shoulder as he passed, not grabbing, not gripping. A single flat touch, like marking something present on a list. Cal made a joke. Vale 9's translator gave him the words, but the timing was the actual content. And timing doesn't translate. Danny laughed. May wound the cord around her wrist, the one that served no tactical function, tight enough that the skin went pale under it for a second. Ren closed her eyes. 30 seconds. Not prayer, not sleep, something else. Something inward. She opened them, and was done. Then they moved. Vale 9 had catalogued pre-engagement behavior across 11 species. He had extensive notes. He threw all of them out in those 2 minutes and started over from nothing. The first kilometer was ugly, but manageable. They moved through a stretch of destroyed low buildings, or what had been buildings, had been converted by the ongoing argument above into a long field of useful cover. They moved fast and low, using the rubble the way skilled things use whenever is available. Vale 9 kept up, which cost him, his torn membrane burning at the edge of every stride. He did not slow them down. This was important to him. He cannot fully explain why, even now. The interviewer asks, and he considers it for a while, before saying only, "I did not want to be something they had to carry." Nobody spoke during the first kilometer. Communication happened in hand signals and body angles, and the particular way Pete's shoulders moved when he wanted a halt versus when he wanted a turn. It was a language built from years inside the same danger. Vale 9 picked up maybe a third of it. He followed the rest by watching Nora. Nora read Pete fluently. The overpass was the problem. It had collapsed at an angle, leaving a section of exposed ground roughly 40 meters across where they would have to cross in the open. No cover, no shortcut. 40 meters of being visible to anything looking. Pete studied it for about 8 seconds. Then he went. No discussion, no ceremony. He just went, moving low and fast across the open ground, and made the other side, and turned, and waited. That was the signal. Lou went, May went, Ren went, Cal went, and somewhere in the middle of those 40 meters, Cal went wrong. It was not dramatic, the way Vale 9 had always understood dramatic to work. Cal didn't fall. He stumbled, one step, and grabbed a piece of exposed rebar, and kept moving. But when he reached the other side, his left hand was pressed flat against his side, and Nora, already crossing, changed her angle without breaking stride, and was beside him before he'd finished arriving. Danny covered the crossing from behind. Vale 9 went. The 40 meters felt like a thing he would remember having done for the rest of his life, however long that turned out to be. Nora had Cal on the ground before Vale 9 was fully across. She moved with both hands and zero wasted motion, and what happened in the next several minutes, Vale 9 can describe only by saying, it looked like someone solving a problem they had solved before. And the problem being a person did not slow her down. Lou and Danny faced outward. Pete watched both directions, covering angles that weren't angles Vale 9 would have thought to watch. May was passing Nora things before Nora asked for them. A system built from shared time, from doing this together enough times that the asking had become unnecessary. Cal said something to Nora, low and close. Vale 9's translator caught it. He does not repeat it to the interviewer. Some things, he says, were said to her, not to history. Cal walked the second kilometer, slowly, with cost, but he walked it. The unit said nothing about this, not a word. They just moved at a pace that made sense for 7 instead of 6. And nobody announced that they were doing this, and nobody thanked Pete for the pace, because Pete had not said it as a favor. He had said it because Cal was there. That was the whole of it. Vale 9 moved behind them and thought about what his species would have done. They would have sent the injured member back. They would have made an efficient calculation about the mission and its requirements, and the member's ability to contribute to those requirements. It would have been the right call by any rational measurement. It would have been the wrong call. He is sure of this now, in a way he cannot fully diagram. Watched the way Cal moved, leaning slightly right to keep weight off the left side, jaws set against whatever the left side was saying to him. The second kilometer was rougher ground than the first. Cal crossed every piece of it. Nora walked beside him, not holding him up, just beside him, near enough. Her hands, when Vale 9 looked at them, were still the color they become when the work has been done and the body remembers it after. The knuckles, the lines across the palm, the small darkness under 2 fingernails, where washing hadn't reached everything. He looked at them for a long time. The interviewer asks him later why he describes her hands that way, why that detail, above everything else from that day. Vale 9 picks up one of the playing cards and turns it over in his fingers. Because they scared me, he says. In the way that you are scared by something that is very real, when you are not fully ready for things to be real. She sets the card back down. She put those hands on Cal Decker in 40 seconds of open ground, and brought him to the other side. I had seen weapons do less. The structure they stopped in that night was the same one Vale 9 had landed in. He recognized the blinking red light first. It had kept going through the whole day, through the 2 kilometers, through everything. Still there in the corner of the ruined pod, still saying whatever it had been saying since the crash. He had spent approximately 0 time thinking about it since Nora pulled him out. Seeing it now was like finding an old argument you'd forgotten, and discovering it hadn't forgotten you. He did not tell the unit what the building had been. The small chairs were still there in the corner, and the pegs by the door with the small coats still hanging from some of them, and the board on the wall with the colored marks, and one other thing he had found during the crash that he had not put back. He kept that to himself. The unit settled in the way they always settled, efficiently, without discussion, each person finding their function without being assigned it. Lou checked the walls. Pete checked the exits and the ceiling holes and stood at each one for a few seconds, running calculations Vale 9 could only guess at. Ren took the first watch position, near the lowest gap, the one that looked out on the approach. Danny found a corner and sat against the wall and started shuffling the cards. The sound of them was the same as always, fast and papery and rhythmic. A constant small thing in a room full of large uncertainties. Cal was down. Not badly. Nora had managed the wound well enough, and the human capacity to simply continue operating through damage that would disable most species Vale 9 knew remained one of the more unsettling things he was in the process of learning about them. Cal was propped against the wall with his jacket bunched behind his head and his eyes half open, and every so often he said something to Danny, and Danny said something back, and they both left it there without building on it. May sat close, but not too close, the way a person sits when they are ready to move, but giving the other person room to not need them. Outside, the engagement they'd been threading through all day finally had the conversation it had been threatening to have. The sounds were not small sounds. The walls of the building registered them as vibrations, a deep, irregular shudder that Vale 9 felt through the floor and up through his limbs. Nobody even looked at the walls. Vale 9 looked at the walls. Nora was cleaning and repacking her bag in the way she always did after a hard push, going through everything, accounting for everything, hands running over each item, not just to check it, but to know it was there. Vale 9 had watched her do this twice now, and understood it was not inventory. It was its own kind of counting. He moved to the part of the room he had not been in before, behind the collapsed section of roof, past what used to be the front of the building. He moved slowly, his secondary limbs still unhappy, the red light blinking at his back. The room back here had been a different kind of space. Lower ceiling, smaller, more contained. Something had come through one wall at an angle, and left a long diagonal split through the whole side of it. And the split had pulled the wall's outer layer away, and what was inside the wall had spilled out across the floor, in a long pale stripe. Among the debris, still taped to the inner surface of the wall that had been protected from the outside, was a drawing. 6 legs. A sun. That was all. The 6-legged thing was round and yellow, the same as the sun, as if the creature and the sun were related. A child's hand. He knew this from the scale and from the way the lines were made. Confident in direction, but soft in execution. The lines of someone who had not yet learned that mistakes need correcting. He looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it. The way you fold something that has no business being this intact, that has survived something it had no right to survive, that is somehow more whole than everything around it. He put it in the inner membrane pocket, where his species carries significant objects. The pocket is close to the core body, warm. The transcript notes a long pause here. The session is paused. When it resumes, Veil 9 does not explain what he felt. He says only, "I have a word for it in my language. It does not translate well. The closest your language gets is grief for a stranger. But that is not quite right either. It is more specific than that. It is grief for a specific size of thing." Danny found him in that back section of the room, sometime in the middle of the night. He sat down like it was a decision he'd been building toward for a while. He started shuffling the cards, and the sound of them filled the space between the two of them. And after a minute, he said, "Can't sleep." "I do not sleep the way you do," Veil 9 said. "What do you do instead?" "I go inward," Veil 9 said. "My species has a practice. We turn the senses down and let the mind do its work without them." Danny thought about this. "Sounds like sleep." "It is not sleep." "Sounds like sleep," Danny said again, but not in a dismissive way. In the way of someone filing the information away under a category that doesn't quite fit, knowing it doesn't fit, keeping it anyway. He asked Veil 9 what his homeworld smelled like. He asked if Veil 9's species dreamed. He asked if Veil 9 had ever done something he was ashamed of. Veil 9 answered all 3. The third answer is not in the transcript. He asked for it to be removed. The interviewer respected this. What is in the transcript? Danny listened to all of it. Every word. He shuffled the cards, and he listened. And at the end, he didn't say anything wise or useful. He just said, "Huh," and kept shuffling. "That is a good word," Veil 9 told the interviewer. "Huh? It means, I heard you, and I am still here." Pete and Lou talked in the front section. Veil 9 was not meant to hear it. He heard the shape of it, not the content, not the full words, but the rhythm of two people trying to figure out how much of themselves is left. The tone that belongs to conversations held at the bottom of things. Lou's voice, low and level, laying something out. Pete's voice, even lower, agreeing to it, and then quiet. Veil 9 turned his senses down and let it go. Some things are not his to carry. Near dawn, a section of the ceiling let go. A chunk of it, a big one, came down in the far corner with a sound like the building making a final decision about something. Nobody was under it. The dust cleared, and May Solis started laughing. A full, real laugh, the kind of laugh that has no reason to exist in that room at that moment, and exists anyway, the way certain flowers grow through pavement, by sheer insistence. Cal started laughing, then Danny, then Lou, just once, short, like it surprised him. Ren's mouth moved in a way that was almost a smile, which from Ren was the same as a standing ovation. Pete, from the front section, said, "Everyone good?" "Building tried to get us," Danny called back. "Missed." "Noted," Pete said. Vale 9 sat in the corner with the drawing in his inner pocket, with the red light still blinking behind him, and without planning it, without intending it, he made a sound, a low sound from the back of his resonance chamber. His species uses it at the end of hard things, when the hard thing has not killed you, and you are not quite sure what to do with that. Danny looked at him immediately. There it is, Danny said, like he had been waiting for it, like he had known it was in there all along. The larger force arrived at the edge of the corridor at midday. Vale 9 heard them before he saw them, a different quality of sound, organized and deliberate, the sound of many bodies moving with a shared direction. The unit heard them too. Pete went to the gap in the wall and looked, and then turned and said one word, just a number, and something in the room changed. Not relaxed, something more specific than relaxed. They gathered their things. They checked each other's gear in the way they always did, without announcing it. Lou made the circuit with his hand, touching shoulders. May wound the cord. Ren stood still for 30 seconds. Cal picked up his pack like the pack was not a problem, and met Vale 9's eyes for a moment, and said nothing with his face that could be translated. But Vale 9 understood it to be something like, I'm still here. See that? I see that, Vale 9 thought. He did not say it. Danny gave the cards one last shuffle, and then held the deck out to Vale 9. You should take these, he said. Vale 9 looked at them. Why? Because you look like someone who needs something for chance, Danny said. Also, we're probably getting issued better supplies on the other side, so... Vale 9 took the cards. They were warm from Danny's hands. The handoff was not a ceremony. 2 members of the recovery unit came with a containment pod. Standard galactic issue, clean and white and entirely wrong-looking against the burnt wreckage of the corridor. They spoke to Vale 9 in his own language, which should have been a relief and mostly wasn't. Pete shook Vale 9's secondary limb. The secondary limb is not the one his species uses for that purpose. The gesture was wrong, technically, which Pete had no way to know. But the grip was solid and deliberate, and held for a moment before releasing. And the wrongness of it didn't matter against the rightness of the intention. Stay out of the fire, Pete said. Vale 9 wanted to say something large. He had been building towards something large, something that would account for the 2 days, for the school, for the 2nd kilometer, for Danny's cards and Ren's half-smile and the way May left food near him without looking. He said, I will try. Pete nodded. He turned back to his unit. They were already moving. Lou passed without looking at him, which Vale 9 understood by now was not coldness. It was how Lou moved through endings. May walked past and touched his left arm, just briefly, fingers grazing the torn membrane. Cal raised one hand as he went by without turning around. Ren stopped. She was the last one before Nora. She looked at him the way she had looked at him the first day, as if she understood him without needing the translation. Then she said, Take care of the thing in your pocket. He put his hand on the membrane pocket without thinking. She was already past him. Nora was last. She stopped in front of him and looked at him with the same eyes that had looked at him in the rubble of the school on the first day. The eyes that had done the full inventory of the situation before she finished speaking. She looked at him like that now, taking stock. She said, Tell them what it's actually like. Not a request, not even a suggestion. The tone of something that has already been decided and is simply being delivered. He said, I will. She walked to her unit. They went. Vale 9 stood in the corridor and watched them move away into the broken terrain of Karath until they were too small to follow, and then gone. And he stood a moment longer in case the moment had anything else to give him. It didn't. He got in the recovery pod. The Galactic Council debrief room was very clean. This was the first thing Vale 9 noticed, that it was clean in a way the last 2 days had made feel like a kind of statement. White walls, smooth surfaces, A table with nothing broken about it. 6 council members in seats that had never been slept in clothes that had never touched rubble. He gave them his tactical data first. Coordinates, enemy positions, route mapping, the specific structural weaknesses in the Karath corridor that a forward force could use. He gave them all of it, clearly and thoroughly. And when he was finished, 2 of the 6 nodded, and 1 made notes. Then he kept talking. He talked about the laughter in a building that was shaking, about the pre-mission ritual, the shoulder touch, and the cord, and the 30 seconds of stillness. About Cal Decker walking 2 kilometers on a wound that had no business being walked on. About May Solis leaving food near him without looking. About Danny's cards, and the way the sound of them filled a room. About Ren and the draft. About Pete's 12-word briefing. About Nora counting backward from a number he never learned. He talked about the drawing. He talked for a long time. 2 council members told him this was not relevant intelligence. He told them it was the only relevant intelligence. He filed a report. 214 pages. The Galactic Council classified 211 of them within the week. The 3 they did not classify were a section on human psychology under pressure, a section on unit cohesion in active combat, and 1 paragraph Veil 9 titled What Nora Said, which was not what Nora said. It was what she meant. He thought these were different things, and that the difference was important. The 3 pages leaked. This is, to put it plainly, why this interview is happening. The interviewer asks the question, the obvious one, the one Veil 9 has been answering for years, in different rooms and different languages, to different kinds of disbelief. Are humans dangerous? He is quiet for a moment. He picks up one of the playing cards and turns it over, sets it back. Every species I have catalogued, he says, gets smaller when it is frightened, quieter. It conserves. It calculates the minimum needed to survive, and sheds the rest. He lines the cards up on the table, one by one, no particular order. Humans get larger. I watched a man take a hit, in the middle of 40 meters of open ground, and walk the 2nd kilometer anyway. I watched a woman clean my wound, because it needed cleaning, and there was no other reason. I watched 6 people sit in a building that was coming down around them, and laugh, not because they were not afraid, but because the fear did not own them. Because they had something they valued more than safety, and it was in the room with them. He straightens the cards, looks at them. I watched a child's drawing survive an airstrike on a school. I was the one who found it. I still have it. He touches the inner pocket. The Galactic Council's position is that humans represent an unpredictable variable in the corridor conflict. Their word is unpredictable. They use it like a warning. He looks up. I watched Nora Calloway sit alone in a destroyed building for 11 hours and count herself back to steady, and then stand up and walk into the war and do her job. I watched Pete Garza set a pace that cost the mission nothing except time, because one of his people needed the time. I watched Danny Ree listen to an alien describe a world he would never see and say nothing dismissive and nothing false. He gathers the cards, puts them in his pocket, next to the drawing. Dangerous, he says, is not the word I would choose for a species that responds to extinction-level fear by reaching for the person next to them. The interviewer asks, what word would you choose? Veil 9 stands. The session is over. I would not choose a word, he says. I would choose a sound, the one I made in the school when the ceiling fell and May laughed and Danny said, there it is. My species uses it at the end of hard things, when the hard thing has not killed you. What does it mean? The interviewer asks. It does not translate, Veil 9 says. He walks to the door, stops, does not turn around. But it means something like, we are still here. See that? He leaves. The playing cards are in his pocket. The drawing is in his pocket. And the red light, if you ask him, the one that kept blinking in the wreckage of the pod, the one that had something to say and no way left to say it, he will tell you he thinks about it sometimes, in quiet moments. He thinks it was saying the same thing all along. We are still here. The interviewer sets a recorder on the table and asks Vale 9 where he wants to start. Vale 9 looks at the playing cards between them, picks one up, sets it back down. Start with the sound, he says. Everything starts with the sound. The sound was a scream that had no mouth. That is the only way Vale 9 can describe it. Even now, years after the pod came apart around him, and the planet called Karath came up too fast, and the instruments told him in 7 different frequencies that he was going to die. The alarm did not stop when the pod hit ground. It kept going, like it had committed to the idea of dying and wasn't ready to let it go. Vale 9 lay in the wreckage and listened to it for what felt like a very long time. His left secondary limb was bent wrong. The cockpit glass was gone. Smoke or dust or both moved through the space where it used to be, slow and thick, the kind of air that had given up on being air. One instrument panel blinked red in the corner of what was left of the dashboard. Just one. Everything else was dead. That one little red light kept blinking like it had something to say and no way left to say it. He stared at it. He counted the blinks. He did not think about the mission, or his species, or the Galactic Council, or the war below him that had just become the war around him. He thought about the blinking light. This is, he would later explain, what his kind does when the body understands that the mind needs a moment. The pod had landed inside something. 4 walls still standing, more or less. A ceiling mostly gone. Debris everywhere. Chunks of concrete, twisted metal, things he couldn't name from where he was lying. The outside sounds came through the open roof in waves. Distant booming, something that crackled, a mechanical groan from far away that repeated every few minutes, like a question nobody was answering. His training said, assess. His body said, not yet. So he looked at the room instead. It took him longer than it should have to understand what the room had been. The scale of things threw him off. The small chairs, stacked in a corner that hadn't collapsed. A board on one wall with marks on it in several colors. Pegs near what used to be a door, some of them still holding small pieces of fabric. Coats, he would learn later. Children's coats. He did not know it was a school yet, not in that first hour. He only knew the chairs were very small. His secondary limb made a sound when he moved it, not a good sound. He got himself upright against the inner wall of the pod and ran a quick check on his own systems. The membrane on his left side was torn. His sensory nodes were running at about 60%. The translator bead at the base of his jaw was working, which was something. One working thing. The red light blinked. He was looking at it when he heard her. Not walking, not coming from outside. Already there, somewhere in the room, behind a section of fallen ceiling he hadn't looked past yet. A voice, low and even, saying numbers. Not in the way his species counts, not as data, not as rhythm. This was slower, deliberate, like each number was a small weight being set down on a table before picking up the next one. She was counting down from somewhere in the high 50s when he first heard it. He never found out what number she had started from. He did not move. His instinct said, be still, be small, be nothing in the rubble until you understand what you are dealing with. Then the counting stopped. A pause. 7, 8 seconds of nothing. And then she came around the broken concrete, and she looked at him, and she said, well, okay then. Her name was Nora Calloway. He would not know this for another 3 hours. In that first moment, she was just a human, standing with a bag over one shoulder and dust on every part of her, and eyes that had already done a full inventory of the situation before she'd finished speaking. She was not afraid of him. He could read basic threat responses across 17 species, and she was not displaying a single one. What she was displaying instead was something he had no category for. He would spend the rest of the war trying to build one. She came closer, looked at his secondary limb, looked at the torn membrane, looked at the blinking red light on the panel, glanced at it the way you glance at a neighbor's broken window, just noting it, and then looked back at him. "That looks like it hurts," she said. His translator gave him the words. He did not know what to do with the tone, which was not a question. "It does," he said, because it was true, and because he could not think of anything else. She nodded, like he had confirmed something she already knew. She set her bag down, opened it, started moving through it with both hands, quickly but not rushed, the kind of quick that comes from knowing exactly where everything is. "I've been in this building for 11 hours, she said, not looking up. "I thought I was the strangest thing in it." "I am sorry to disappoint you," he said. The translator chose the words. He was not sure they were the right ones. She looked up at that, really looked, and then the left side of her face did something. A crease appeared, brief, just at the corner of her mouth. "No," she said, "you're a significant upgrade." She cleaned the wound on his sensory membrane, without explaining why she was doing it, without asking, without making a production of it. She just did it the way you do something that needs doing. And when she was finished, she closed her bag and sat back and started counting again. From 32 this time, going down. He watched her. His one working instrument blinked behind him. Outside, something exploded. Then another thing. Then quiet. She didn't look up. 29, 28, 27. Vale 9 would write in his report to the Galactic Council that the first human he encountered in the Kareth corridor demonstrated no visible stress response, despite 11 hours of isolation in a collapsed structure inside an active war zone. The Council would mark this section as an instrument error. They would assume he had misread her. He had not misread her. He had simply failed, in that first hour, to understand what he was actually seeing. What Nora Calloway was doing, sitting in the rubble of a dead school, counting her way down from a number she never told him, was not the absence of fear. It was what she did with it. He would not understand this for 2 more days. The red light blinked. She counted. Outside, the war continued making its sounds. He stayed still, and for reasons he still cannot fully explain to the interviewer across the table from him. The staying still felt, for the first time since the pod alarm started, like something he had chosen. Small thing, but in that room, it was everything.